Welcome to Mystery Manor Tales. I'm your host, Alex. Today we're diving into a chilling, atmospheric mystery in the style of the Queen of Crime herself, Agatha Christie. Settle in with a cup of tea, dim the lights, and let me transport you to the 1920s with Hercule Poirot and the Holiday Manor Dark. This is a long, immersive tale perfect for those cozy evenings. Over 90 minutes of narration if you're listening at a relaxed pace. We'll unfold it chapter by chapter with all the twists, red herrings, and brilliant deductions you expect from Poirot. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Holiday Manor. The fog that December afternoon in London was the color of old pewter. It pressed against the windows of Hercule Poirot's flat in Whitehaven Mansions like a living thing, muffling the clop of horse-drawn cabs and the distant cry of newspaper boys. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant with the scent of bergamot from the little silver teapot on the lacquered tray. Poirot sat in his favorite armchair, legs crossed, patent leather shoes gleaming, a copy of Le Figaro folded neatly to the crossword. He had just completed the grid in 11 minutes, a personal record, and was permitting himself a small, satisfied smile. His valet, Georges, entered without a sound, the way only the very best valets can. In his gloved hand rested a single envelope on a silver salver. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and bore an embossed crest, a stag rampant beneath a coronet, the Ashford arms. "Monsieur," said Georges, "this arrived by the second post. The messenger insisted it be delivered into your own hands." Poirot's eyebrows rose a millimeter, the equivalent in Poirot terms of a gasp. He slit the envelope with the ivory letter opener that had once belonged to a Grand Duchess and drew out 2 sheets of heavy writing paper. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and just a shade too controlled, as though the writer had paused after every word to steady her nerve. Georges, who had served Poirot long enough to know the game, replied at once. "The crest is genuine Ashford. Gulls a stag argent. The paper is handmade, watermarked 1924. The ink is fresh, but the pressure of the nib varies. See the heavier downstrokes on the M in murder." The lady was agitated, and the postmark is Lewis, posted yesterday. Précisément. Yet she writes of a murder that has not yet occurred. A preventative consultation? How novel. Poirot rose, smoothing the crease in his trousers. "Telephone the garage. We depart for Sussex tomorrow. Pack the gray cashmere overcoat, the fur-lined gloves, and the green velvet smoking jacket. One must be warm, but one must also be correct." The train from Victoria the following morning was the 9:15 to Lewis, a handsome Pullman carriage with brass fittings and the faint perfume of cigars clinging to the upholstery. Poirot traveled first class naturally and occupied a corner seat where he could observe his fellow passengers, without appearing to do so. Opposite him sat a young woman in a cloche hat the color of damson plums, reading Vogue with theatrical absorption. Beside her, a clergyman snored gently into his dog collar. In the corridor, a porter wheeled a trolley that clinked with the promise of coffee and bath buns. At Lewis, a motor car awaited, a stately Daimler limousine with the Ashford crest on the door. The chauffeur, a taciturn man named Wilkins, touched his cap. "Roads are already treacherous, sir. Snow started at dawn. We'll be the last vehicle through before the lanes close." The drive took an hour, winding through frost-laced beech woods and past villages where smoke curled from thatched chimneys. At last the car turned between stone gateposts topped with weathered griffins and began the long ascent to Holiday Manor. The house revealed itself gradually as though reluctant to be seen. First the chimneys, then the slate roofs, then the whole vast facade. 3 stories of mellow Tudor brick laced with Gothic windows and a riot of chimneys. Ivy clung to the walls like green frost. The mullioned windows glinted with the last light of afternoon. Snow lay in unbroken drifts across the terrace, and the great front door, oak-studded with iron, stood open, spilling a rectangle of golden lamplight onto the virgin white. A butler of immense dignity awaited them on the steps. He was tall, thin and silver-haired, with the posture of a guardsman and eyes the color of winter steel. "Monsieur Poirot, I am Hargrove. Lady Ashford's compliments and welcome to Holiday Manor." Poirot inclined his head. "Enchanté, Monsieur Hargrove. You have, I observe, a military bearing. The Coldstream Guards, perhaps?" Hargrove's left eyebrow twitched, the ghost of a smile. "The Rifles, sir. 22 years. Her ladyship is in the long gallery, if you will follow me." They passed through a vaulted entrance hall where suits of armor stood sentinel beneath banners faded to the color of old blood. A Christmas tree soared to the rafters, its branches heavy with glass icicles and real wax candles yet unlit. The scent of pine and beeswax hung in the air. From somewhere deeper in the house came the faint, plangent notes of a piano, someone playing In the Bleak Midwinter with more melancholy than the carol warranted. The long gallery ran the length of the east wing, its walls hung with portraits of Ashford's long dead. Bewigged judges, bewitched beauties, a cardinal in scarlet, and one dour admiral whose eyes seemed to follow Poirot as he walked. French windows looked out over the snow-covered rose garden where a marble fountain had frozen mid-spurt, the nymph's stone hands cupped around an icicle. Lady Evelyn Ashford stood before the great fireplace, warming her hands at a blaze that would have roasted an ox. She was perhaps 45, tall and slender, with the kind of bone structure that photographs well and ages even better. Her gown was midnight blue velvet, severe yet regal, and at her throat gleamed a single sapphire the size of a pheasant's egg. When she turned, Poirot saw that her eyes were the same winter steel as Hargrove's, though hers held fear beneath the composure. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a hand gloved in lace, "you cannot know what your presence means. I have read of your exploits until the pages are worn thin." Poirot bowed over her hand with courtly grace. "Madame, it is my pleasure to serve, though I confess your letter intrigues me. A murder that has not yet happened, c'est du jamais vu." A flicker of something, relief, guilt, crossed her face. "Come, let me present the company. We are a small party this year, but intimate." She led him to a cluster of people arranged around a tea table that groaned beneath silver cake stands and a samovar the size of a small cannon. The fire crackled. Outside, the snow thickened, erasing the world beyond the windows. First, my husband, Sir Reginald Ashford. A broad-shouldered man in his late 50s rose from a leather wing chair. His face was florid, his mustache magnificent, and his tweed smelled faintly of gun oil and peat. "Poirot, by gad, the missus said you were coming, but I scarcely believed it. Famous detective in the house, dashed exciting." Poirot murmured polite nothings while noting the brandy on Sir Reginald's breath and the slight tremor in the hand that held the monocle. "Miss Clara Beaumont, my niece." A young woman of 25, fashionably slender, with bobbed chestnut hair and eyes the color of absinthe. She wore a dress of emerald crêpe de chine that left her arms bare and her intentions unmistakable. "How do you do, Monsieur Poirot? Aunt Evelyn says you can read minds. Can you tell what I'm thinking now?" Her smile was half challenge, half invitation. "Alas, mademoiselle, I read only the minds of the guilty. The innocent remained delightfully opaque." A laugh rippled around the room, though Poirot noted it did not reach Lady Evelyn's eyes. "Dr. Victor Langston, our family physician and old friend. A thin, ascetic man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a nervous habit of polishing the lenses on his tie. His handshake was dry and quick, as though contact with skin might contaminate. An honor, monsieur, though I hope your visit proves unnecessary." Hope, Doctor, is a luxury we detectives rarely afford. Mr. Theodore Blackwood, business associate of my husband. A corpulent man in a charcoal suit that strained at every seam. His cufflinks were diamonds the size of shirt buttons, and his laugh boomed like a cannon. Reggie and I go back to the Boer War supply contracts, don't you know? Made a packet, lost a packet, made another. Life's a gamble, eh, Poirot? Indeed, monsieur, though some gambles end in more than bankruptcy. Finally, a woman who had been standing half in shadow stepped forward, Mrs. Isolde Hargrove, my housekeeper and the true mistress of this house. She was perhaps 50, upright as a ramrod, her gray hair coiled beneath a lace cap. Her hands were clasped so tightly the knuckles showed white. Sir, Madam speaks highly of you. Dinner is at 8. The gong sounds twice. Poirot inclined his head. Madam Hargrove, I perceive that nothing escapes your notice. A valuable quality in a housekeeper, and in a detective. A flicker of surprise, then the faintest softening. This way, sir. Your room is prepared. The guest suite was on the second floor, overlooking the rose garden. A fire burned in the grate. A 4-poster bed dwarfed the room, its hangings embroidered with peacocks. On the dressing table lay a sprig of holly and a card. With gratitude, E.A. Poirot unpacked with methodical care, silk handkerchiefs folded into exact squares, the green smoking jacket laid across a chair. The small leather case containing his magnifying glass and tweezers placed precisely beside the Bible. Only then did he permit himself to examine the room. He tested the window latches, secure, tapped the panels for hollow sounds, none, and noted that the door lock was a sturdy Brahma, pickable but not without noise. A soft knock. George entered with a tray, a pot of chocolate, thin slices of plum cake, and a note in Lady Evelyn's hand. The library was a cavern of oak and leather, its shelves rising 2 stories, accessible by a wrought iron spiral staircase. A fire roared. The air smelled of Russia leather and cedar. Lady Evelyn stood by the window, a silhouette against the whirling snow. You came, she said simply. Madame, you spoke of murder. Poirot does not ignore such words. She turned. In the firelight, her face looked haggard. Reginald is difficult. He made enemies in India, opium concessions, railway bribes. Blackwood claims Reggie cheated him of a fortune. Clara wants to marry an actor. Reginald threatens to disinherit her. Dr. Langston. There was an incident with morphine, a patient who died. Reginald holds the proof. And you, madam, she flinched. I married beneath my station, or so my family said. Reginald's title is old, but the money is new and running out. If he dies, the estate passes to me. But I swear to you I wish only to prevent bloodshed, not cause it. Poirot studied her. You fear a specific act? Tonight is the lighting of the great tree. Tradition demands the master of the house place the star. The chandelier in the hall is raised and lowered by a winch in the attic. Someone has tampered with the rope. I found fibers cut almost through. If it falls, mon Dieu, and the guests, all will be beneath it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then we have work, madame. First, the rope must be replaced. Second, Poirot will watch. Third, he paused, listening. Somewhere in the walls a board creaked, though no footstep followed. Third, we discover who walks the corridors when all should sleep. Outside, the snow fell thicker than ever, erasing footprints, silencing the world. Inside Holiday Manor, the candles flickered, the shadows lengthened, and 8 people prepared for a Christmas that would end in darkness. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. The gong in the entrance hall was a relic of the Raj, solid Burmese bronze, its rim chased with elephants and lotus flowers. When Hargrove struck it at precisely 7:45, the note rolled through the house like distant thunder. lingering in the rafters long after the mallet had stilled. It was the signal. 20 minutes until dinner, 30 until the lighting of the tree. Upstairs, Hercule Poirot adjusted his white tie in the looking-glass. The reflection that stared back was immaculate, hair parted with mathematical precision, mustache waxed to rapier points, the emerald studs in his cuffs catching the firelight like drops of poison. He allowed himself one final glance around the guest suite. The holly sprig on the dressing table had been moved, 3 millimeters to the left. Someone had entered in his absence. He filed the fact away, then descended the grand staircase with the measured tread of a man walking into a duel. The entrance hall had been transformed. The Christmas tree, 20 feet of Norwegian spruce, stood in the center like a green cathedral, its branches weighted with crystal icicles, real candles in silver clips, and strands of tinsel that shimmered like frost. Above it hung the chandelier, a constellation of 1,000 cut-glass droplets, each catching the candlelight and fracturing it into rainbows. The winch rope, thick hemp, tarred and glossy, rose through a brass ring in the ceiling and disappeared into the shadows of the attic. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The rope had been replaced as he had instructed, but the new fibers were already fraying at the edges. Someone had been at it again. The guests assembled in knots like chess pieces waiting for the first move. Sir Reginald stood beneath the chandelier, a glass of whiskey in one hand, the other resting on the carved newel post. He wore the Ashford tartan waistcoat, crimson and forest green, and his face was flushed with anticipation and alcohol. "Tradition, Poirot," he bellowed. "The master lights the tree, places the star, and the house is blessed for another year. Been doing it since I was in short trousers." Lady Evelyn, pale in a gown of smoke-gray silk, hovered at his elbow. "Reginald? Perhaps Monsieur Poirot should—" "Nonsense! The fellow's here to enjoy himself, not play nursemaid." Sir Reginald drained his glass and handed it to a passing footman. "Where's the star, Hargrove?" The butler materialized from the shadows, a velvet box in his gloved hands. Inside nestled the Ashford star, an antique piece of rock crystal mounted in gold filigree, said to have been a gift from Queen Elizabeth to the first baronet. It winked like a captive comet. Clara Beaumont drifted in, a vision in scarlet chiffon that clung to her like a flame. She carried a cigarette in a long ebony holder and exhaled smoke towards the ceiling in languid spirals. "Uncle, do hurry, the candles are dripping and I'm famished." Dr. Langston followed, adjusting his spectacles with the air of a man who would rather be anywhere else. His dinner jacket was a shade too tight across the shoulders. Poirot noted the bulge of a leather notebook in the breast pocket. Mr. Blackwood lumbered behind, diamonds flashing at his cuffs, a cigar clamped between teeth yellowed by decades of Havana leaf. Mrs. Hargrove stood at the foot of the stairs, hands folded, eyes scanning every face as though memorizing sins. Poirot took his place near the library door, half in shadow. From here he could see the winch rope, the chandelier, and every entrance. His little gray cells ticked like a well-oiled watch. At 8:15 the candles on the tree were lit, first the lower branches by the footman, then the higher ones by Hargrove on a library ladder. The hall filled with the scent of beeswax and pine resin. Sir Reginald climbed the 3 shallow steps to the dais beneath the chandelier. The star was passed up to him on a crimson cushion. He raised it high, and the glass droplets above chimed softly, a crystalline whisper. "Behold," he cried, "the Ashford star, light of our house." He reached up to place it on the tree's highest spire. In that instant, 3 things happened almost simultaneously. First, the winch rope gave a sharp, audible crack, like a musket shot in the confined space. Second, the chandelier lurched downward a full foot, its candles guttering wildly, glass droplets raining like hail. Third, Lady Evelyn screamed, not the polite gasp of a society hostess, but a raw animal sound that tore through the hall. Sir Reginald froze, the star still in his hand. The chandelier swayed above him, suspended by a single frayed strand. One more heartbeat and it would fall. Poirot moved faster than any man his size had a right to. He sprang forward, seized Sir Reginald by the waistcoat, and yanked him backward off the dais. They tumbled together onto the turkey carpet as the chandelier crashed down exactly where Sir Reginald had stood. Crystal exploded in a glittering storm. Candles rolled across the floor, igniting fringes of the rug, the air filled with the stench of scorched wool and hot wax. For a moment, silence, absolute, stunned. Then chaos. Clara dropped her cigarette and stamped it out with a scarlet heel. Dr. Langston knelt beside a footman whose forehead streamed blood from a flying shard. Blackwood swore in a voice that could have peeled paint. Mrs. Hargrove's lips moved soundlessly, prayer or curse impossible to tell. Poirot rose, brushing glass from his sleeves. "Messieurs, dames," he said calmly, "it seems the blessing of the house has been delayed." Sir Reginald scrambled to his feet, face purple. "Sabotage! Someone tried to kill me." Lady Evelyn clutched his arm, her knuckles white. "Reginald, please." But Sir Reginald shook her off. "Hargrove, who had access to the attic?" The butler's face was a mask. "Only myself, sir, and Wilkins, the chauffeur. The door is kept locked." Sir Reginald rounded on his wife. "You insisted on inviting this Belgian busybody. Perhaps he arranged the whole thing for dramatic effect." Lady Evelyn recoiled as though slapped. "Reginald, how can you—" "Enough!" Poirot's voice cracked like a whip. "Accusations are the luxury of fools. We have a crime, attempted murder, and a locked attic. We will examine the scene now before footprints are trampled and evidence destroyed." He led the way up the servants' stairs, a narrow spiral of stone worn hollow by centuries of feet. The attic door was at the far end of a corridor lined with dusty trunks and moth-eaten tapestries. The lock was a simple Yale, scratched around the keyhole but intact. Hargrove produced the key from his waistcoat pocket. Inside the attic was a cavern of shadows. Moonlight filtered through a single dormer window, silvering the dust motes that danced in the cold air. The winch mechanism, a wooden drum the size of a wagon wheel, stood in the center, the severed rope coiled around it like a dead snake. Poirot's torch beam swept the floorboards. Footprints, 2 sets, one large, heavy, with the ridged sole of a workman's boot, the other smaller, lighter, the imprint of a woman's evening slipper, narrow heel, Louis XV style. Both led to the winch and back to the door. Hargrove cleared his throat. "The large prints are mine, sir. I replaced the rope at 4 o'clock, as you instructed. The smaller—" He hesitated. "I cannot say." Clara's voice floated up from the doorway. "Size 5, I should think. That's my size." She had followed them along with the others, unable to resist the drama. "Though I dare say half the women in Sussex wear evening slippers." Poirot ignored her. He was examining the window. The catch was undone. Snow had drifted onto the sill. Outside, the roof sloped steeply to the eaves. A narrow ledge ran along the gutter, wide enough for a cat perhaps, but not a man. Yet there were scratches on the paintwork, fresh, as though something metal had scraped across. "Someone entered from the roof," Poirot murmured. "But how? The snow on the ledge is undisturbed." Dr. Langston peered over his shoulder. "The dormer faces north. The wind would have scoured any prints within minutes." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "or perhaps our visitor used a different path." He turned to the group clustered in the doorway. "Who among you was in the attics this evening after 6 o'clock?" Silence. Then Blackwood shrugged. "I was in the billiard room losing spectacularly to Sir Reginald. Ask the markers." Sir Reginald nodded. Until 7:30 when I went to change, Lady Evelyn said quietly. I was in my boudoir, writing letters. Clara smiled sweetly. Practicing my lines in the music room. The piano faces the window. I'd have seen anyone crossing the roof. Dr. Langston pushed his spectacles up his nose. I told you I was here at 6 looking for a medical text. Then I went down to the library. Mrs. Hargrove spoke for the first time. I was in the still room preparing the wassail. The footmen can vouch for me. Hargrove added, I locked the attic at 4:15 and did not return until now. Poirot's gaze lingered on each face. Then we have a phantom who cuts ropes, leaves footprints, and vanishes into thin air. They descended in a somber procession. The hall below was a scene of devastation, crystal shards glittering like frost, the chandelier a twisted wreck. Footmen swept frantically. The tree stood miraculously intact, its candles still burning. Dinner was a subdued affair. The dining room was paneled in dark oak, hung with portraits of Ashford ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow every forkful. The table was set with the family silver, candlesticks shaped like stags, salt cellars in the form of swans. Yet the roast beef might have been sawdust for all the notice it received. Conversation limped. Sir Reginald drank steadily, his mood swinging between rage and maudlin self-pity. First the chandelier, then what? Poison in the pudding? A dagger in the dark? Clara lit another cigarette. Really, Uncle, you're becoming paranoid. Perhaps the rope was simply old. Old? Sir Reginald slammed his glass down. It was new this afternoon. Blackwood leaned forward, his multiple chins quivering. Reggie, old chap, let's not brawl in front of the ladies, though I'll admit someone's got it in for you. Question is, who benefits? Lady Evelyn's hand trembled as she reached for her wine. Theodore, please. Dr. Langston murmured, statistically, the spouse is always the first suspect. Lady Evelyn's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the parquet. Red wine spread like blood. Poirot watched it all, his face unreadable. After dinner, the ladies withdrew to the drawing room. The men lingered over port and cigars. Sir Reginald produced a revolver from his pocket, a Webley service issue well oiled. From now on, I sleep with this under my pillow. Let the bastard try again. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. Planning to shoot shadows, Reggie? Shadows don't cut ropes. Poirot excused himself early, pleading fatigue. In truth, he had work to do. At 11:30, the house was dark save for the night lights in the corridors. Poirot, in dressing gown and slippers, moved silently through the upper floors. He carried a small electric torch and a ball of twine. First, the attic again. He measured the footprints. Hargrove's were size 10, the smaller ones, exactly 5 inches from heel to toe. Clara's size, but also Lady Evelyn's. He noted the direction. The smaller prints approached the winch from the left, while Hargrove's came from the right. 2 separate visits. Next, the roof. He opened the dormer and leaned out. The wind had died. The snow on the ledge was pristine. But lower down, where the gutter met the drain pipe, there was a smear of soot. Someone had climbed using the chimney stack for handholds. The climb was possible, but only for someone light and desperate. Back inside, he followed the twine he had trailed earlier. It led to a disused servant's staircase, narrow and steep, ending in a baize door behind the music room. From there, a corridor connected to the main stairs. The phantom's route. At midnight, he stood outside the music room door. Inside, someone was playing the piano, softly, haltingly. The same phrase over and over, the opening bars of God rest ye merry, gentlemen, but slowed to a dirge. He eased the door open a crack. Clara sat at the grand piano, her back to him, scarlet dress pooled around the stool like spilled blood. She played with one hand. The other held a cigarette, ash lengthening unnoticed. On the music stand lay a sheet of paper, not music, but a letter. Even from the doorway, Poirot could see the handwriting. If you marry that actor, you'll get nothing. Nothing. Clara sensed his presence and whirled. Monsieur Poirot, do you make a habit of sneaking about like a burglar? Only when burglars are abroad, mademoiselle. He stepped inside. That letter, may I? She hesitated, then handed it over. The paper was cheap, the ink purple. Postmarked London 3 days ago. From your uncle? He denies it. But who else would care? Poirot folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket. We shall see. As he left, he heard her begin to play again. This time, Silent Night, the notes trembling like a heartbeat. At 1 o'clock, Poirot sat in his room, a small table before him. On it, the rope fibers, the soot from the gutter, the letter, and a single evening slipper. Size 5, satin with a louis heel. He had found it in the attic, hidden behind a trunk. The sole was damp, the heel scratched. Someone had worn it on the roof. He was arranging the items in a neat row when a scream shattered the silence. Not the polite cry of a lady, but a full-throated howl of terror that seemed to come from the very walls. Poirot was out of his chair in an instant. The scream came again, closer now, from the direction of Sir Reginald's study. He ran. The study door was locked, from the inside. The key gleamed in the lock. Through the keyhole, Poirot saw Sir Reginald slumped over his desk, a dagger buried to the hilt in his chest. Blood pooled on the blotter, dripping onto the carpet with a soft, relentless plink. The windows were bolted, the fireplace cold. No other door, no way in or out. Poirot rattled the handle. Sir Reginald, open this door. No answer. Only the ticking of the ormolu clock on the mantel and the soft sigh of snow against the panes. Behind him, footsteps pounded. Lady Evelyn arrived first, wrapper clutched to her throat. Then Clara, Blackwood, Dr. Langston, Hargrove, and his wife appeared as if conjured. Who screamed? Poirot demanded. Mrs. Hargrove's face was chalk. I did, sir. I brought Sir Reginald his nightly whiskey and saw... She pointed a trembling finger at the keyhole. Poirot straightened, his face grim. Then we have a problem, mes amis. Sir Reginald is dead, murdered in a room locked from the inside. The impossible has occurred. Outside, the snow fell thicker than ever, sealing Holiday Manor in a white tomb. Inside, the candles guttered, the shadows lengthened, and 8 people stared at a locked door behind which lay a corpse, and a mystery that defied reason. Chapter 3. Shadows in the Snow. The study door stood before them like a sealed tomb, solid oak, iron-bound, the brass lock gleaming with malevolent innocence. The key was still in the lock on the inside, turned fully. Through the keyhole drifted the copper-sweet scent of fresh blood. Poirot's voice cut through the stunned silence. Madame Hargrove, you discovered the body. Tell me, exactly. Mrs. Hargrove's hands twisted the apron until the starch cracked. I brought Sir Reginald his nightly whiskey, sir. 11 pipes he always smoked, then a dram of the Lafroig. I knocked at 12:55. No answer. The door was locked. I bent to the keyhole to call again, and saw him. Slumped forward. The dagger. Her voice cracked. I screamed, then I ran. Poirot nodded once. And the time precisely? My watch said 1 minute past 1. Dr. Langston pushed forward, spectacles flashing in the candlelight. Stand aside, I'm a doctor, let me confirm death. Poirot barred the doorway with an outstretched arm. No, doctor, the scene must remain untouched, but you may look through the keyhole. Langston knelt awkwardly. After a moment he straightened, face ashen. Dead. At least 30 minutes. Rigor has not begun, but lividity is pooling. The dagger entered the heart directly. Death instantaneous. Blackwood's voice boomed from the rear. 30 minutes? That's impossible. We were all together in the drawing room until midnight, then upstairs by 12:30. Clara's laugh was brittle. Speak for yourself, Mr. Blackwood. I went to the music room at 12:15, alone. Lady Evelyn's whisper barely stirred the air. Reginald was alive at 12:45. He came to my room, quarreled about Clara's inheritance. He left in a temper. Poirot's eyes glittered. Then the murder occurred between 12:45 and 1 o'clock, a window of 15 minutes in a locked room. With the key on the inside, he produced a thin steel probe from his waistcoat and inserted it into the keyhole beside the key. A soft click. The key fell inward onto the carpet with a muffled thud. Poirot turned the handle. The door swung open. The study was a gentleman's sanctum. Walls lined with gun racks and Indian miniatures, a tiger skin rug before the hearth, a massive partner's desk of burled walnut. Sir Reginald sat, or rather slumped, face down across the blotter, right arm dangling, fingers brushing the carpet. The dagger protruded between his shoulder blades at a perfect 45-degree angle. Blood had soaked through his dinner jacket in a dark, symmetrical bloom. Poirot moved like a surgeon. First the windows, 2 sash, both bolted from inside, frost feathering the panes. No footprints in the snow outside, 3 feet of virgin white. The fireplace, cold ashes, no secret panel. The door, only one, the lock undamaged, the key lay where it had fallen. He knelt, examined the dagger. A Gurkha kukri, Sir Reginald's own from the mantelpiece display. The blade is wiped clean of prints, but the handle bears his own, thumb and forefinger only. Curious. Dr. Langston hovered. He was stabbed from behind while writing. See the pen still in his left hand? Ink has blotted the page. Poirot lifted the blotter carefully. Beneath was a half-finished letter. My dear Blackwood, the Indian Railway shares were never yours to claim. I have the original contracts. It ended mid-sentence. The nib snapped. Blackwood read over Poirot's shoulder and snorted. Convenient. Reggie always was a liar. Poirot ignored him. He was studying the carpet. A single set of footprints, Sir Reginald's own, led from door to desk. None returned, yet near the hearth, a faint scuff mark, heel only, as though someone had pivoted sharply. Someone stood here, Poirot murmured, facing the desk, then vanished. He opened the desk drawers. In the top right, a revolver fully loaded. In the left, a bundle of letters tied with red ribbon. The top one, in feminine handwriting. My darling R, meet me in the summer house at midnight. Come alone. Lady Evelyn's face drained of color. That was years ago, before we married. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. Summer house? In this weather? Poirot pocketed the letters. We will examine motives later. First, alibis. Hargrove, fetch paper and pencil. We begin. They gathered in the long gallery, the only room large enough for the Inquisition. Candles guttered in silver sconces. The portraits of dead Ashfords glared down like a jury. A fire roared, yet the cold seeped through the stones. Poirot stood before the fireplace, a small figure dwarfed by ancestral oil paintings, yet commanding every eye. We proceed systematically. From 12:45 a.m. to 1 a.m., 15 minutes. Each will account for every second. Reginald left my room at 12:47. I heard the grandfather clock in the hall strike the 3/4. I locked my door and read the Times until Mrs. Hargrove screamed. My maid, Jenkins, was asleep in the dressing room. She can confirm I did not leave. I was in the music room from 12:15, playing Chopin, Opus 28, number 15, The Raindrop. I heard Uncle Storm past at 12:48. He slammed his study door so hard the chandelier rattled. I continued playing until 1:05 when I went upstairs. Asked the footman on night duty, he passed me on the landing. Port and cigars with Sir Reginald until 12:30. He was in a foul mood, threatened to ruin me over those damned shares. I went to the billiard room, practiced cannons alone until 12:55. The marker, Evans, brought me a whiskey at 12:52, checked the pantry log. I retired at 12:20 with a headache, took a dose of Veronal in my room. I was awake reading the Lancet when I heard the scream. My door was locked from inside, key still in the lock. Hargrove. I locked the front door at 12:30, checked the windows, then retired to our quarters off the kitchen. Mrs. Hargrove prepared the whiskey at 12:50. We were together until her scream. Mrs. Hargrove nodded. I left the kitchen at 12:55, tray in hand. Reached the study at 12:58, knocked, no answer. Looked through the keyhole, saw him dead. Screamed at 1:01. Poirot scribbled furiously. Times align. Yet the study door was locked from within, the windows bolted. No chimney wide enough for a man, no secret passage. I have checked the paneling. He tapped the page. Therefore, the murderer was in the room with Sir Reginald, locked the door, committed the crime, and escaped without trace. Clara rolled her eyes. Or Uncle locked himself in and committed suicide. Stabbed himself in the back? Impossible, Dr. Langston said. The angle is wrong, and the kukri is curved requires a swinging motion from behind. Blackwood lit a cigar with trembling fingers. Then we're dealing with a ghost. Poirot's smile was thin. Ghosts leave no footprints, monsieur. And we have footprints, Sir Reginald's own, and that curious scuff by the hearth. At 3 a.m., Poirot ordered the study sealed. Hargrove nailed a plank across the door. The guests retired under a pall of suspicion. Poirot did not sleep. At 4 a.m., he returned to the study with a candle and his magnifying glass. He lay flat on the tiger skin, eye to the carpet fibers. The scuff mark by the hearth was deeper on the left, weight shifting. He measured exactly 32 inches from the desk's edge. He opened the gun rack. One slot empty, the kukri's twin. The remaining blades were dusty. The missing one had been cleaned recently. In the grate, a scrap of burnt paper. He teased it out with tweezers. Charred words, trust no one, the will. At 5 a.m., he examined the corridor outside the study. The runner carpet showed a faint indentation, heel marks leading away from the door, then vanishing where the pattern changed to parquet. Someone had walked on tiptoe. At 6 a.m., he summoned Hargrove to the butler's pantry. The attic rope. Where is the original, the one replaced yesterday? Hargrove produced a coil from a cupboard. Here, sir. Cut almost through as you saw. Poirot examined the fibers. This was cut with a left-handed motion. The angle slopes down to the right. Our chandelier saboteur is left-handed. Hargrove's face remained impassive. Sir Reginald was right-handed, sir. Précisément. Dawn never came. The snow turned to sleet, rattling the windows like grapeshot. At 8 a.m., the household assembled in the dining room for a breakfast no one wanted. Kippers congealed under silver domes, toast curled like old parchment. Poirot entered with a bundle under his arm. He laid it on the table, the original attic rope, the burnt paper scrap, the love letter, the evening slipper from the attic, and, most damning, a small key tied with red ribbon. This, he said, holding up the key, was found in Sir Reginald's waistcoat pocket. It opens the summer house. Someone intended a midnight rendezvous. Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her throat. That letter is 20 years old. Yet the ribbon is fresh silk, Poirot said. Purchased within the month from Harrods, if the weave is any guide. Clara examined the slipper. This is my slipper. I lost it yesterday, thought it went under the bed. Non, mademoiselle. It was on the attic roof. Size 5, satin Louis heel. but the sole is damp and smells faintly of soot. Someone wore it to climb the chimney stack. Dr. Langston removed his spectacles, polished them furiously. This is absurd. We're trapped in a blizzard with a madman. Or a madwoman, Blackwood muttered. Poirot raised a hand. We search the house. Every room, every cupboard. We look for wet clothing, left-handed scissors, a duplicate study key. We begin now. They searched in pairs, Poirot with Hargrove, Lady Evelyn with Clara, Blackwood with Dr. Langston, Mrs. Hargrove alone. The house yielded its secrets grudgingly. In Clara's room, a left-handed embroidery scissors in her sewing basket. In Dr. Langston's medical bag, a vial labeled Veronal, half empty. In Blackwood's dressing case, a forged railway share certificate in Sir Reginald's handwriting. In Lady Evelyn's boudoir, a diary with yesterday's entry. He knows about V and me. God help us. In the Hargroves' quarters, nothing but impeccable order. At noon, Poirot gathered them in the library. Snow light filtered through the windows, turning faces corpse pale. We have motives, he said. Sir Reginald was rewriting his will, Clara disinherited, Lady Evelyn to receive everything, Blackwood ruined by exposure, Dr. Langston facing disgrace over a patient's death. Even the Hargroves, Sir Reginald planned to sell the manor, pension them off. Mrs. Hargrove's chin lifted. We've served 40 years. We die before harming the family. People kill for less, Poirot said, gently. But motive is not method. The locked room defeats us. He paced before the fire. Consider. The door locked from inside, key on the floor. The windows bolted. No chimney exit. Yet the murderer entered after Sir Reginald, stabbed him and left, locking the door behind them. How? He stopped before a suit of armor. Unless the door was never locked from the inside at all. Dr. Langston frowned. But the key was pushed through the keyhole from the outside with a probe, my own demonstration. The murderer locked the door, posted the key back through and let it fall. But the bolt? He tapped the armor's breastplate. Observe. With a flourish, he unbolted the study door from the outside using a bent wire, threaded through the gap where the door met the jamb. The bolt slid back with a soft click. Blackwood gaped. Good God! But the windows, Clara protested. They were bolted too. Bolted after the murderer left, Poirot said. By someone already inside the room. Silence. Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. Sir Reginald was not alone when he died. The murderer entered with him, or was waiting. They quarreled. The dagger struck. Then the killer staged the locked room, pushed the key through, bolted the door from outside with wire, and walked away. He turned to the group. But one detail remains. The scuff mark by the hearth. 32 inches from the desk. The exact height of a man bending to retrieve something from the floor. He produced a small object from his pocket, a gold cufflink engraved with the initials T.B. Blackwood blanched. That's mine! I lost it days ago! Non, monsieur, you lost it tonight. When you bent to pick up the key you dropped in your haste. The cufflink rolled under the desk. You retrieved it, leaving the scuff. Blackwood's mouth worked soundlessly. Poirot's eyes were green ice. You argued with Sir Reginald about the shares. He threatened exposure. You followed him to the study. He turned to pour a drink. You struck. Then you staged the impossible crime. Blackwood lunged for the door. Hargrove caught him by the collar and pinned him like a butterfly. But Poirot raised a hand. Wait. There is more. He turned to Dr. Langston. You said death was instantaneous, yet the letter was blotted mid-word. A man does not write after his heart is pierced. Langston stammered. I assumed. And you, doctor, were in the attic at 6 o'clock. Your footprints, size 9, but with a worn left heel. The smaller prints were made over yours. Someone following you, wearing slippers to muffle sound. Langston's hand went to his throat. Poirot's voice was soft as snowfall. The impossible crime was a collaboration. Blackwood provided motive and muscle. Langston provided medical knowledge to stage the wound post-mortem. He laid the final piece on the table, a hypodermic syringe hidden in Langston's medical bag, residue of curare, paralytic, undetectable in small doses. Sir Reginald was poisoned first, curare in his whiskey, paralyzed but alive. Blackwood entered, stabbed the already dying man, wiped the blade, locked the door, posted the key. Langston confirmed instant death to hide the poison. Langston collapsed into a chair. He was going to ruin me. Blackwood struggled in Hargrove's grip. The shares were mine. Lady Evelyn began to weep silently. Clara stared as though seeing them for the first time. Poirot sighed. The snow will clear by morning. The police will come. Justice will be served. He turned to the window. Outside, the storm raged on, but for the first time, a thin blade of sunlight pierced the clouds, gray, cold, and merciless. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Past. The long gallery at 2 in the afternoon was a cavern of gray light. Snowlight, the locals called it, thin, metallic, the color of a blade. It filtered through the tall windows and laid a pallor over the faces gathered around the tea table. No one had changed since breakfast. The same dinner jackets, the same gowns, the same haunted eyes. Even the fire seemed reluctant to burn. Hercule Poirot stood before the marble chimney-piece, hands clasped behind his back. On the table before him lay the evidence of the morning. The curare syringe, the forged share certificate, the cufflink, the love letter tied with fresh ribbon. And now, a new addition, a small brass key on a velvet ribbon, found threaded through the eye of the kukri dagger when Hargrove removed it from the body for the coroner's eventual arrival. Poirot lifted the key between thumb and forefinger. This, he said, opens the summer house, yet the summer house is locked, bolted, and buried under 4 feet of snow. Who planned a rendezvous in a blizzard? Lady Evelyn's teacup rattled in its saucer. I told you, that letter is ancient history. Poirot's smile was gentle, terrible. Madame, silk ribbon fades. This ribbon is crimson still. Purchased, as I said, within the month, and the key... He held it to the light. Bears a scratch on the bow. Fresh. Made by a nervous hand forcing a lock that resisted. Dr. Langston, pale and unshaven, spoke from the depths of an armchair. You're building a castle on sand, Poirot. Blackwood and I have confessed to the murder. The method was ours. The motive was ours. Let it rest. Blackwood, wrists bound with Hargrove's necktie, glowered from the sofa. He's right. We did it. Hang us and be done. Poirot shook his head. Non, monsieur. You have confessed to a murder, but not the murder. Sir Reginald was poisoned, yes. Stabbed, yes. But the locked room, he tapped the table, was staged after death. And the curare? A paralytic, not a killer in that dose. Sir Reginald was alive when the dagger struck. Your confession is a lie to protect someone. Silence, thick as the snow, outside. Clara broke it. Then who? Poirot's eyes swept the room. That is what we discover now. We search again, this time for what was hidden in plain sight. They began in the summer house. The path to it lay beneath a tunnel of yew, the branches bowed under snow like mourners. The door was a Gothic arch of oak, iron-bound, the lock furred with frost. The brass key turned with a shriek. Inside, the air was colder than the grave. Dust sheets shrouded wicker chairs. A gramophone stood mute in the corner, its horn choked with cobwebs. On a lacquered table lay a single object, a woman's kid glove, left-handed, monogrammed CB. Clara stared. "That's mine. I lost it last summer." Poirot lifted it with tweezers. Inside the cuff, a dark stain, dried blood. "And this blood is fresh. Type O, if the crust is any guide. Sir Reginald's type." Dr. Langston swallowed. "Impossible. The summer house has been locked since October." Poirot's torch beam swept the floor. Beneath the dust, footprints, small, narrow, a woman's court shoe. They led to a chaise longue, then to a small door at the rear. The door opened onto a potting shed, and from there, a narrow path to the kitchen garden. The snow here was trampled, but not by one set of feet. Two, one small, one larger, dragging something heavy. Hargrove's voice was grim. "The coal chute, sir, leads to the cellar. Someone brought the body here, after death." Poirot nodded. Sir Reginald was killed elsewhere. The study was a stage. Back in the manor, the search intensified. In the cellar, a wheelbarrow, its floor stained with blood and melted snow. A trail of droplets led to the coal chute. In the kitchen, a butcher's cleaver missing from the rack. The blade matched the width of the kukri wound, exactly. In Clara's room, a diary locked, the key hidden in a musical box. Poirot opened it with a hairpin, the final entry dated yesterday. "He knows about the child. If he tells, I'm ruined. V says we must act tonight. The summer house at midnight. Bring the cleaver." Clara read it aloud, her voice trembling. "This isn't my handwriting." Poirot compared it to the anonymous letters she had received. Identical slant, identical pressure. "Then who wrote it, mademoiselle?" At 4 o'clock, the power failed. The generator in the stables coughed and died, plunging the manor into candlelight. Shadows leapt across the paneling like demons. The temperature plummeted. Breath plumed in the air. Poirot gathered them in the library. The fire had burned low. The room smelled of tallow and fear. "We reconstruct," he said. "Sir Reginald quarreled with his wife at 12:45. He went to the study to write his accusation against Blackwood. But he never reached the desk alive." He paced. "Someone intercepted him in the corridor. A woman, small feet, size 5. She lured him to the summer house with the promise of a secret. There in the dark, she struck with the cleaver once to the heart. Then, with an accomplice, she dragged the body through the coal chute to the cellar, up the back stairs, and into the study." Blackwood laughed harshly. "A woman couldn't lift him. Reggie was 16 stone. No, but 2 could. And the wheelbarrow explains the drag marks." Lady Evelyn's voice was a thread. "You're saying I killed my husband?" Poirot turned to her. "Madame, you were in your room, your maid confirms. But the glove in the summer house, monogrammed EA, not CB. I lied earlier. It is yours." He produced the glove from his pocket. The monogram was clear. EA. Lady Evelyn stared as though at a serpent. "I lost that glove years ago." "Or you planted it to implicate Clara." Clara gasped. "Aunt Evelyn?" Poirot's voice was relentless. "The diary forgery. Your handwriting, madame. The ribbon on the love letter. Bought by you in London last month. The curare. Stolen from Dr. Langston's bag by you to paralyze your husband so he could not cry out. Blackwood and Langston confessed to shield you. Blackwood out of an old affair, Langston because you hold his malpractice secret." Lady Evelyn rose slowly. "You have no proof." Poirot smiled. "Ah, but I have." He produced a small glass vial from his waistcoat. "This was found in the summer house, hidden in the gramophone horn. Laudanum, enough to drug a horse. And your fingerprints, madame, are on the bottle." He turned to the others. The locked room was simple. After the body was placed, the door locked from outside with the wire, the key posted through. The bolt slid back with a string, pulled from the corridor, the thread cut and retrieved through the gap under the door. The scuff mark. Blackwood, retrieving the thread. Blackwood lunged again, But Hargrove was ready. Lady Evelyn's face crumpled. He was going to leave me penniless. For her, she pointed at Clara. His bastard daughter from India. The will, he changed it yesterday. Everything to her. Clara recoiled. I'm not. You are, Lady Evelyn spat. I found the locket in his desk. Your mother's portrait. He planned to acknowledge you, ruin us all. Poirot's voice was soft. And so you killed him. With Langston's poison, Blackwood's strength, and your hatred. At 6 o'clock, as the confessions hung in the air like smoke, a new scream echoed, this time from the attic. The attic door stood open. Inside, Dr. Langston lay sprawled across the winch drum, a kukri dagger, the twin from the gun rack, buried in his back. Blood pooled beneath him, steaming in the cold. The dormer window was open, snow drifted across the floorboards. Poirot knelt. Dead not 10 minutes, the wound is fresh. Blackwood, still bound, stared in horror. I was downstairs, Clara whispered. Another locked room. The attic door had been locked from the outside. The Yale latch clicked shut. The key was in Poirot's pocket, taken earlier. The window showed no footprints on the ledge. Poirot's face was grim. The killer struck again, and this time, truly impossible. He examined the body. Langston's right hand clutched a scrap of paper. Poirot pried it free. You betrayed me. Now you join him. The Lady Evelyn, brought up under guard, stared at the corpse. I didn't. Poirot's eyes were steel. You did. You climbed the servants' stairs, picked the lock with a hairpin. Your maid taught you years ago. You stabbed him as he bent over the winch, then locked the door from outside and posted the key back through the gap under the door. The open window. A blind, he demonstrated with a hairpin from Clara's hair. The lock clicked open. Lady Evelyn laughed high, broken. Yes, I killed them both, Reginald for the will, Victor for his silence. And Theodore, she turned to Blackwood. You were next. Blackwood went white. Poirot sighed. The perfect crime, twice. But perfection, madame, is the enemy of detection. You left the glove, the diary, the vial. You trusted too much in the snow to hide your tracks. He turned to Hargrove. Bind her. The police will come when the thaw begins. That night the manor was silent save for the wind. Poirot sat in the library, a single candle burning. Before him lay the locket, opened now. Inside, a miniature of a young Indian woman, and on the reverse, an inscription. To my daughter Clara, on her 21st birthday. R.A. Clara entered, eyes red. It's true then. Poirot nodded. Your father loved you. In his way. He changed the will to protect you from his wife's greed. She touched the locket. And now he's dead. Because of me. Non, mademoiselle. Because of greed and fear and the past. Outside, the snow began to melt. Drip, 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 like blood from a wound. Chapter 5. Deeper Deceptions. The thaw began at dawn with a sound like distant artillery, great sheets of snow peeling from the roof and crashing into the rose garden. By 9 o'clock, the gravel drive was a river of slush, and the telephone lines, which had hung dead for 3 days, crackled back to life with a single metallic cough. Hargrove reported it to Poirot in the breakfast room, where the detective sat alone buttering a triangle of toast with geometric precision. The exchange says a police car will attempt the lane by noon, sir. Inspector Japp himself. Poirot nodded once. Bien. But noon is 4 hours away, and 4 hours is an eternity to a murderer who believes the game is not yet finished. He rose, napkin folded into a perfect square. Summon the household to the long gallery. We have one last act to perform before the curtain falls. They assembled at 10, the same 8 souls, 7 living, 1 absent in spirit. Lady Evelyn sat between Hargrove and his wife, wrists bound with silk cord from the drawing-room curtains. Her face was marble, but her eyes burned with a feverish brilliance. Dr. Langston's body had been moved to the billiard room. Blackwood remained under guard in the gun room, sullen and silent. Clara stood by the window, locket clenched in her fist. The fire hissed. Outside, the world dripped. Poirot took the center, a small green volume in his hand, Sir Reginald's appointments diary, recovered from the study safe. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we have a confession. Lady Evelyn admits poisoning her husband with curare, stabbing Dr. Langston in the attic, and orchestrating the locked room illusion with Blackwood's assistance. The motive: a new will that disinherited her in favor of Clara, Sir Reginald's illegitimate daughter. Case closed, you would say." He opened the diary to a page marked with a mourning band. "Yet this entry, dated 3 days ago, contradicts everything." He read aloud. "Met C in summer house. Told her the truth. She is furious. Threatens exposure. Must change will tonight. E must never know." Clara's head snapped up. "That's not my handwriting." "Précisément," Poirot said. "It is Sir Reginald's, but the ink is fresh, written after his death. Someone forged the entry to frame you, mademoiselle." Lady Evelyn laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "Absurd. I was locked in my room." Poirot ignored her. "We have 3 crimes: the chandelier sabotage, the murder of Sir Reginald, the murder of Dr. Langston, all impossible, all connected. Yet the connections form a knot that tightens around the wrong throat." He laid the diary on the table and produced a second document, a single sheet of heavy vellum folded thrice, the Ashford crest embossed in gold. "The true will," he announced. "Found this morning behind the portrait of the Admiral in the gallery. Sir Reginald did not change it yesterday, he changed it 6 months ago. Everything to Clara. Lady Evelyn retains only a life interest in the London house. The forgery we found in the safe was planted to incite murder." Clara stared. "Then, Uncle planned this?" "No. Someone discovered the true will and used it as bait." At 10:30, Poirot ordered the summer house searched again. The thaw had revealed what snow concealed: a shallow grave beneath the chaise longue, the earth soft from the coal stove used to warm the glass house. Inside lay a third body, wrapped in a dust sheet, throat cut ear to ear. The face was unrecognizable, bloated by decay, but the clothes were unmistakable. A footman's livery, the brass buttons stamped Ashford. Hargrove identified him with a choked voice. "Evans, the billiard marker, missing since the night of the chandelier." Poirot knelt in the mud. "Killed the same night. The cleaver wound matches the kukri's curve. Same weapon. Evans saw the chandelier sabotage, was silenced, buried here. The body in the study was not Sir Reginald at first glance." He peeled back the sheet further. Beneath the livery, a second waistcoat, tartan Sir Reginald's own. "The switch," Poirot said. "Evans was murdered in the summer house. Sir Reginald, drugged with laudanum in his whiskey, was brought here alive, hidden under the chaise. The livery was stripped from the corpse and dressed on Sir Reginald to confuse identity. Then the real Sir Reginald was moved to the study, stabbed post-mortem to create the locked room." Blackwood's voice cracked from the doorway where Hargrove held him. "But I saw Reggie alive at midnight." "You saw a man in Reggie's clothes, face shadowed by the fire. Dr. Langston confirmed death without close examination, because he helped stage it." Poirot tapped the slate. "The scream was for the wrong man. Sir Reginald died of exposure in the corridor, heart failure from laudanum and cold. The study corpse was a decoy." Clara's voice was small. "But why?" Poirot turned to Mrs. Hargrove. "Madame, you prepared the whiskey. You found the body. You locked the attic. You buried Evans. You are the only one present at every stage." Mrs. Hargrove's face did not change. "I've served this house 40 years. 40 years of resentment, Poirot said softly. Sir Reginald dismissed your son for theft in 1910. The boy hanged himself in Dartmoor. You waited. When the will changed in Clara's favor, you saw justice. He produced a locket from his pocket, identical to Clara's, but the portrait inside was a young man, fair-haired, smiling. On the reverse, to mother with love, J.H. Mrs. Hargrove's composure cracked. He was innocent. Reggie framed him for the silver theft to cover his own gambling losses. Hargrove stepped forward, eyes wet. Isolde, no. She ignored him. I cut the rope to kill Reggie under the chandelier. Evans saw me. I lured him to the summer house with a note, forged Clara's hand, cut his throat. Then the plan changed. I drugged Reggie, switched the bodies, staged the locked room. Let Evelyn take the blame. She deserved it for her affair with Langston. Poirot's voice was gentle. And Langston? He guessed, threatened to tell. I stabbed him in the attic while he examined the winch, locked the door, posted the key, the open window, distraction. Poirot led them to the cellar. Behind the coal bins, a small door, locked but the wood rotten. Inside, a priest hole from Elizabethan days, long forgotten. On the floor, Sir Reginald's signet ring, a torn scrap of tartan waistcoat, and a single candle stub, still warm. Sir Reginald woke here, Poirot said, crawled out, collapsed in the corridor. Mrs. Hargrove found him alive at 1:15, finished him with the cleaver, dragged the body back to the summer-house grave. The study corpse, Evans, remained the decoy. Mrs. Hargrove sank to her knees. 40 years. For my boy. Hargrove's voice broke. You should have told me. I did it for us both. At noon, the police car crunched up the drive, blue lamp flashing through the sleet. Inspector Japp stepped out, umbrella inverted by the wind. Poirot met him at the door. 3 bodies, Chief Inspector. 1 murder, 1 suicide, 1 miscarriage of justice, 40 years in the making. Japp removed his hat, water streaming from the brim. And the locked room? Poirot smiled. A red herring, mon ami. The real crime was in the summer house and in a mother's heart. That evening, the manor was silent. The thaw had stripped the gardens bare. The summer house door hung open, the grave yawning empty. Clara stood on the terrace, locket in hand. Poirot joined her. You inherit everything, mademoiselle, but the house is tainted. She closed the locket. I'll sell it, start a home for boys like Mrs. Hargrove's son. Justice, in a way. Poirot nodded. The past is buried. Let the future grow. Behind them, Hargrove locked the great door for the last time. The key turned with a sound like a sigh. Chapter 6. The Revelation. Inspector Japp, red-faced from the wind, barked orders. Photographs first, then fingerprints, and someone find me a decent cup of tea. This isn't the Savoy. Poirot stood apart near the great window that overlooked the ruined rose garden. The sky was the color of wet slate. Rooks wheeled above the chimneys like scraps of burnt paper. He held the wooden soldier between thumb and forefinger, turning it slowly. Japp approached, notebook in hand. Well, Poirot, your little gray cells satisfied? We've got Mrs. Hargrove for Evans and Langston, Lady Evelyn for attempted framing, Blackwood for accessory. Sir Reginald died of exposure in the cleaver. Case tied with a bow. Poirot's mustache twitched. A bow, oui, but the wrong ribbon. He placed the toy soldier on the table beside the locket. Observe, the paint is fresh, vermilion lead-based, manufactured post-1923. Yet Mrs. Hargrove's son died in 1910. This toy was not his. Japp frowned. Then whose? Poirot's voice dropped to a murmur that carried to every corner. The child who was never born. At 6:15 p.m., Poirot ordered the household, living and accused, into the library. The fire had been stoked high. Candlelight glinted off the spines of first editions. Mrs. Hargrove sat flanked by two constables, wrists cuffed now with steel. Lady Evelyn unbound but watched chain-smoked Turkish cigarettes. Blackwood nursed a bruised jaw. Clara stood by the globe, fingers tracing the outline of India. Hargrove, silent, broken, stood behind his wife like a monument about to topple. Poirot began without preamble. We have believed 3 murders. In truth, there was only one. The others were shadows cast by a single flame. He lifted the wooden soldier. This was found at 5:45 this evening, wedged behind the summer house chaise. The paint matches a tin in the nursery attic, opened yesterday. Someone played with it after the crimes. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. The nursery has been locked since my cousin died in 1918. Précisément. Yet the lock was picked. With this. He produced a bent hairpin, Clara's from her own dressing table. Clara shook her head violently. I was never... You were, Poirot said gently. At 3 a.m. on the night of the murder, I followed your footprints in the slush, size 5 Louis heel, but with a distinctive nick in the left sole. The same nick as the slipper on the attic roof. He turned to the room. Let us reconstruct the truth, the whole truth. Poirot paused. The fire crackled. Outside, the rooks had settled. Clara confronted Mrs. Hargrove at 2 a.m., he continued. They argued. Clara threatened to confess everything. Mrs. Hargrove, desperate, locked Clara in the priest hole with the real Sir Reginald's body, planning to dispose of both at dawn. He turned to Clara. You escaped at 4 a.m. through the loose panel. You went to the summer house, retrieved the wooden soldier, your last link to the father you never knew. You left it as a message, I know. Clara's voice was a whisper. I wanted him to suffer, not die. When I saw Mrs. Hargrove kill him, I froze. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes were dry now. He destroyed my boy. I would do it again. At 6:45, the final revelation. Poirot opened the globe. Inside, nested in velvet, lay a fourth object, a reel of fishing line, monofilament, invisible in candlelight. This, he said, was used to lower the chandelier rope from the attic dormer to the winch. Cut from outside, then retrieved. The footprints in the attic were staged with slippers over boots. The real saboteur never entered the attic. He looked at Hargrove. You, monsieur. You locked the attic at 4:15, but you returned at 7:30 p.m. with the fishing line. You cut the rope from the dormer, then pulled the line back through the window. Evans saw you from the rose garden, blackmailed you. You killed him in the summer house, began the chain. Hargrove's shoulders sagged. Isolde planned it. I only helped. Poirot's voice was soft. You both loved your son, but love turned to vengeance, and vengeance to murder. Poirot placed it in Clara's hand. A child's toy, the only innocent thing in this house. That night, the manor was emptied. Constables led the Hargroves to the police car, heads bowed. Lady Evelyn was taken separately, charged with perjury. Blackwood and Langston released, left without a word. Clara stood on the steps, locket around her neck, watching the tail lights disappear into the dusk. Poirot joined her. You will sell the house? Yes. The money will fund a trust. For children like the Hargroves boy, and for the child I might have been. Poirot nodded. The past is a locked room, mademoiselle. You have the key now. Behind them, the great door closed for the last time. The key turned. The house exhaled. Chapter 7. Justice served. The police lorries left at 8:17 p.m., tires hissing through the mud like departing serpents. Red tail lights winked once, twice, then vanished down the lane. Holiday Manor stood dark, windows blind, the great door sealed with a constable's wax stamp. Only 2 figures remained on the terrace. Hercule Poirot collar turned up against the drizzle, and Clara Beaumont, coatless, the locket cold against her throat. Inspector Japp's final words still hung in the air. Case closed, Poirot. 3 for the gallows, 1 for perjury, 2 for wasting police time. Clean as a whistle. He had clapped Poirot on the shoulder, climbed into the lead car, and was gone. Poirot watched the empty drive. Clean, he repeated softly. But justice is rarely clean, mademoiselle. It is sharp. And it cuts both ways. Clara's voice was raw from weeping. They're taking the Hargroves to Lewis Jail tonight. Mrs. Hargrove asked to see me. I couldn't. Poirot offered his arm. Come, we walk the garden one last time. The house has given up its dead. Now it gives up its living. They followed the gravel path to the rose garden, now a quagmire of trampled snow and broken canes. The marble fountain stood dry, the nymph's hands still cupped around an icicle that had melted to a dagger of water. The summer house door hung ajar, crime scene tape fluttering like a funeral banner. Inside, the chaise longue had been removed, but the outline remained. A darker rectangle on the dusty floor. Poirot knelt, brushed away sawdust, and revealed a small brass plate screwed to the boards. Engraved in childish letters, J.H. 1905-1910. Gone but not forgotten. Clara's breath caught. Mrs. Hargrove's son. She must have hidden it here years ago. Poirot traced the letters with a gloved finger. A shrine. Every year on his birthday, she came here alone. The staff thought she tended the roses. In truth, she tended a grave. He stood. Come, there is one more thing. They descended to the cellar via the kitchen stairs. The coal chute yawned open, a black mouth exhaling damp. A constable's lantern still hung from a hook, its beam cutting through the gloom. The priest-hole door stood propped open with a crate. Inside, the air was colder, the walls sweating. Poirot pointed to the far corner. A small bundle lay wrapped in oilskin, untouched by the police search. He unwrapped it carefully, a child's pinafore yellowed with age and a lock of fair hair tied with blue ribbon. Beneath, a photograph, a boy of 5, solemn-eyed, standing beside a younger Mrs. Hargrove in starched apron. On the back, in faded ink, my Jamie. Taken the day before the master sent him away. Clara's tears fell onto the ribbon. She kept him alive down here all these years. Poirot's voice was gentle. Grief is a locked room, mademoiselle. Some never find the key. At 9:30 p.m., they returned to the long gallery. The fire had been banked. Embers glowed like dying eyes. On the mantel, the Christmas. Tree candles had burned to stubs. Wax pooled like blood. Poirot lit one fresh taper from the coals and placed it in a silver candlestick. He opened his pocketbook and removed 3 letters, sealed, addressed in different hands. These were given to me by the prisoners before departure. They asked that you receive them after the cars left. Clara took them with trembling fingers. I killed your father. I will not ask forgiveness, but know this. The day he dismissed my Jamie, he killed a part of me too. I waited 15 years for justice. When you arrived, with his eyes and his mother's smile, I saw a chance to right the scale. I am sorry you were caught in it. Burn this house if you must. But plant a rose for my boy. I failed my wife. I failed my son. I failed you. When Isolde told me the plan, I thought only to protect her. I cut the rope. I buried Evans. I locked the doors. I am the butler who forgot his place was to serve, not to judge. Tell the roses I'm sorry I hated you before I knew you. Reginald's bastard, flaunting your youth while I aged in his shadow. I forged the will, the diary, the ribbon, petty cruelties. I deserved the blame they gave me. Take the London house, sell the jewels, live freely. I will rot in Holloway, but at least I rot honestly now. Clara folded the letters into her pocket. What happens to them? Poirot's eyes were on the candle flame. Mrs. Hargrove and her husband will hang together. Judge granted mercy due to age. Lady Evelyn, 7 years for perjury. Blackwood and Langston fined and released. The law has spoken. He paused. But the law does not plant roses. At 10:15 p.m., Poirot led Clara to the nursery. The door stood open. Police tape crisscrossed the threshold. Inside, the rocking horse still rocked gently in the draught, its painted eyes staring. The toy chest had been rifled, but one item remained. A child's slate, chalked with a single word in a woman's hand, "Sorry." Clara picked up the slate. Mrs. Hargrove came here last night. After the confession, she knew the end was coming. Poirot opened the window. The night smelled of wet earth and wood smoke. Below, the constable on guard smoked a pipe, lantern at his feet. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, "the house is yours until probate. What will you do?" Clara looked around the nursery. Faded wallpaper of sailing ships, a doll with one porcelain arm missing. "I'll open it as an orphanage for children like Jamie, like the child I might have been. The Hargrove Trust." She turned to him. "Will you stay for the dedication?" Poirot smiled. "Alas, I am expected in London. Another case, a duchess and a diamond. But I will send a rose bush, white, for innocence." Poirot and Clara walked to the summer house. The grave had been filled in, the earth raked smooth. A constable's spade leaned against the wall. Clara carried a small trowel and a paper packet of seeds. Rosa rugosa, hardy, thornless. She knelt in the mud and dug a shallow hole. Into it she placed the wooden soldier, the lock of hair, the photograph, and the 3 letters. Poirot added the child's pinafore, folded neatly. Clara scattered the seeds. "They'll bloom in June. White roses for Jamie, red for Sir Reginald, pink for the child we all lost." Poirot covered the hole with earth, patted it flat. "And the house?" Clara stood, mud to her knees. "I'll keep the nursery, the rest. Let the children run through the corridors, let laughter drown the ghosts." At midnight, Poirot's Daimler waited at the porte-cochere. Wilkins held the door, cap dripping. Clara embraced Poirot fiercely. "You gave me a father," she whispered, "and took him away. But you gave me a future." Poirot kissed her hand. "The past is a locked room, mademoiselle. You have turned the key." He climbed into the car. As it pulled away, he looked back. Clara stood alone on the steps, lantern in hand. The great door opened behind her. The candle in the long gallery window flickered once, then steadied. A small, defiant light against the dark. The inquest verdict: murder by persons unknown, compounded by misadventure. The Hargroves were hanged at dawn on February 14th, side by side, no spectators. Lady Evelyn began her sentence in silence. Blackwood fled to Tangier, Langston to Canada. Clara Beaumont sold the London house, bought the manor outright, and opened the doors on March 1st to 12 orphans from the East End. The nursery became a dormitory, the long gallery a dining hall, the summer house a playhouse, its floor painted with hopscotch squares. On the first anniversary of the murders, a single white rose bloomed beside the filled-in grave. Beneath it, the wooden soldier lay undisturbed, one arm forever raised in salute. And somewhere in London, Hercule Poirot received a postcard. "Thank you for the rose bush." The children named it Monsieur Moustache. He pinned it above his desk beside the emerald studs and the ivory letter opener. Then he turned to his next case, the little gray cells already whirring. Justice had been served, but mercy had planted the seeds. Chapter 8. The Final Clues. "If this reaches you, I am already dead. Burn it after reading. The truth is uglier than you know." Blackwood, she read on, the children's voices fading to a distant hum. "I write from a hotel balcony overlooking the strait. The sun is merciless, but not as merciless as memory. You believe your father died in the corridor finished by Mrs. Hargrove's cleaver. You believe Evans was the decoy in the study. You believe the Hargroves acted alone. You are wrong on every count. Sir Reginald was already dead when Mrs. Hargrove drugged his whiskey. I poisoned him at 10:45 p.m. Curare in the decanter, not the glass. He collapsed in the gun room during our billiards rematch. Langston confirmed death, then helped me dress Evans in Reggie's clothes and move the real body to the priest hole. The plan: frame the Hargroves, who we knew were plotting via the chandelier. Mrs. Hargrove discovered the switch at midnight. She finished Evans with the cleaver, thinking him Reggie, and dragged the real corpse to the summer house to hide our tracks. We let her. Langston and I confessed to shield Evelyn, who knew nothing. But there is a fourth player, the one who sent the anonymous letters, the one who planted the wooden soldier, the one who watched from the nursery window as the house burned its own. Look under the third step of the servants' stairs. You will find a tin box, inside proof, and a name. Forgive me, or don't. The money I sent monthly to the Hargroves' account was blackmail, paid to keep Isolde silent about my part. She took it to protect her husband. I swim at dawn. The current is strong. Theodore Blackwood. Clara dropped the letter as if it burned. The servants' stairs, narrow, winding, the wood worn to satin by generations of feet. She counted 1, 2, 3. The third riser lifted with a screech of rusty nails. Beneath, a biscuit tin, Army and Navy Stores, 1914. Inside, a bundle of letters in Clara's own handwriting, the anonymous warnings she never sent. A second locket, identical to hers, but the portrait was her mother, aged 20. A photograph. Sir Reginald and a woman, Clara's mother, arm in arm in Simla, 1900. On the back, "To my darling C, our secret," and a single sheet typed, "Clara's knees buckled." Not Clara. Sir Reginald's nephew, presumed dead in the war, invalid at home in 1918, hidden in the East Wing ever since, mad, disfigured, tended by Mrs. Hargrove in secret. At 11 a.m., Clara telephoned Poirot. He arrived by the 2:15 from Victoria, umbrella furled, green gloves immaculate. The children were at lessons. The house hushed. "Show me," he said simply. She led him to the East Wing, a corridor sealed since 1918, wallpaper peeling like old skin. The door at the end was padlocked. Clara produced a key from the tin. Inside, a bedsit, a camp bed, a commode, a gramophone with a single record, Chopin's Raindrop Prelude. On the wall, pinned with drawing pins, dozens of photographs. Clara arriving at the manor, Clara in the rose garden, Clara weeping on the terrace. All taken from the nursery window. Poirot's face was grim. "He watched you, for months." On the bedside table, a diary open to May 14th. Poirot turned the page. The next entry was in a different hand, Mrs. Hargrove's. At noon they walked to the cliff path beyond the estate. The sea was gunmetal, gulls screaming. A constable's helmet bobbed below, searching the rocks. They had found Blackwood's body at 9 a.m., washed up with the tide, a bullet in the temple. Self-inflicted. A note in his pocket. "The child lives." Poirot stood at the cliff edge, wind whipping his coat. "Cedric Ashford," he said, "gassed at Ypres, shell-shocked. Sir Reginald hid him to avoid scandal, paid the Hargroves to nurse him in secret. Cedric believed Clara was his sister. He sent the letters to warn her away from the inheritance he thought cursed." Clara's voice was steady now. "He planted the wooden soldier. He typed the note. He watched me grieve a father I never knew." Poirot nodded. "And when Blackwood's letter threatened exposure, Cedric took his own life to protect the secret. Mrs. Hargrove found him gone, left the tin for you to find." He turned to her. "The house is clean now, truly." Clara gathered the children in the long gallery. The Christmas tree had been replaced by a maypole, ribbons fluttering. She told them a story, not of murder but of a soldier who came home broken, and a butler and his wife who loved him like a son. She did not mention the tin. She did not mention the cliff. Instead, she opened the French windows. The children spilled into the garden, laughter rising like birds. Clara planted the second locket beneath the white roses. Poirot watched from the terrace, then tipped his hat and walked to the waiting car. As the Daimler pulled away, he saw her in the rear-view mirror, barefoot in the grass, arms wide, the children circling her like petals. Chapter 9. Confrontation in the dark garlands of ivy and crimson ribbon twined the portraits. A new Christmas tree, smaller, child height, stood where the old had toppled. Real candles flickered in colored glass holders. The scent of pine and cinnamon drowned the last trace of blood and beeswax. Clara Beaumont, in a simple wool dress the color of winter sky, stood before the assembly. 12 children in starched pinafores, the matron, 2 local dignitaries, and unexpected Hercule Poirot returned from Monte Carlo at her urgent telegram. The children held paper chains. "Tonight," she said, voice clear, "we dedicate the Cedric Ashford Memorial Wing for the boy who was hidden, the soldier who was broken, and the cousin who loved this house enough to die for it." She unveiled the plaque on the nursery door, now painted sky blue, a brass knob polished to sunlight. A murmur rippled through the children. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The date was wrong. Cedric died in May. Why 1926? Clara caught his glance. "A private joke," she whispered. "He always said the house kept its own calendar." The dignitaries clapped politely. The children sang "In the Bleak Midwinter," voices sweet and off-key. At 11:30, cocoa was served. At 11:45, the guests departed. At 11:55, the lights dimmed to night lamps. Poirot lingered. "You telephoned for me, mademoiselle, not for ceremony." Clara's smile faltered. The nursery door locked itself at 11 Saab. From the inside. "The key is on the hook, unused. The children swear they heard piano music, Chopin, the raindrop." Poirot's mustache bristled. "Show me." The nursery corridor was silent, the air thick with the ghosts of lullabies. The blue door stood closed. The key hung on its hook, cold to the touch. Poirot tried the handle. Locked. He knelt, peered through the keyhole. Inside, moonlight striped the floorboards through the barred window. The rocking horse rocked, slowly, rhythmically. The toy chest lid was open. On the slate, fresh chalk. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "That's Cedric's writing. I'd know it anywhere." Poirot inserted his probe. The lock was a simple mortise, undamaged. He turned the key from the outside. It moved freely. He pushed the door. It opened onto darkness. The room was empty, the rocking horse still, the slate blank. But on the windowsill, a single white rose, dew fresh, placed since 11:45. Poirot lifted it. Beneath, a gramophone record. Chopin's Prelude No. 15, The Raindrop. The label handwritten in ink, still wet. Clara whispered, "The gramophone is in the East Wing, sealed since May." At 12:15 a.m. they stood in the sealed East Wing. The padlock was intact, police seal unbroken. Poirot produced a small key from his waistcoat. "Inspector Japp sent me a duplicate for continuing inquiries." Inside, dust thick as felt. The gramophone sat on the table, horn choked with cobwebs. The record was gone. Poirot's torch swept the room. Footprints, small, bare, a child's, led from the bed to the window, then vanished at the wall. The window was bolted from inside, no snow outside, the ground 30 feet below. Clara's voice trembled. Cedric was 6'2". Poirot followed the prince. They stopped at a panel. He pressed. It swung inward. A priest hole, smaller than the cellars, hidden behind the chimney breast. Inside, a child's camp bed, a slate, a box of chalk, A single white rose wilted, and a letter, pinned to the pillow with a hat pin. Clara's knees buckled. Poirot caught her. At 12:45 a.m. they ran through the moonlit garden. The summer-house door stood open. Inside, a candle burned on the chaise longue. Cedric Ashford sat beneath it, emaciated, scarred, one eye milky from gas. He wore a child's nightshirt, too small, the hem ragged. In his lap, the gramophone record. In his hand, a revolver. He smiled. "You came." Clara's voice broke. "You're dead. Dead to the world, alive to you." He touched the locket at her throat. "She was my mother, too. Father hid us both. When you arrived, I thought, finally family." Poirot stepped forward. "You sent the letters, planted the soldier, staged the nursery haunting." Cedric nodded. "To keep her safe. From the will, from the house, from me." He lifted the revolver. "But the house won't let go." Clara reached for him. "Come inside. The children are better without a monster." He pressed the barrel to his temple. "Tell them the soldier found peace." Poirot moved, like lightning. His umbrella hook caught Cedric's wrist. The gun spun away. Cedric lunged for the candle, meaning to burn the summer house, the evidence himself. Clara seized the gramophone record and smashed it over his head. Shellac shattered like ice. Cedric collapsed, weeping. At 1:15 a.m., the local constable arrived, summoned by Poirot's earlier telephone call. Cedric was wrapped in blankets, muttering lullabies. The revolver, unloaded. The candle, snuffed. Poirot examined the priest hole again. A narrow chimney flue connected it to the nursery. Cedric had climbed it nightly, a human spider, to leave roses, to chalk messages, to play the record through a speaking tube disguised as a mouse hole. The footprints, his own, in borrowed children's shoes. The record, smuggled out, played, returned. The rose, cut from the memorial bush at dusk. All to keep Clara in the house. All to keep the family whole. Clara stood on the terrace, the broken record in her hands. Poirot lit his last candle. "He loved you. In his way. He terrified me." She dropped the shards into the rosebed, "But the children will never know." She turned to him. "The dedication plaque, change the date to 1927. Let him live one more year in their story." Chapter 10. The light of truth. The sky over the South Downs was the color of mother of pearl. Hercule Poirot stood alone in the long gallery, overcoat buttoned to the throat, green gloves folded in his pocket. Before him, the Christmas tree lights had been extinguished. Only the memorial candle burned, its flame steady in the draftless air. On the table lay every artifact of the case. The 2 kukri daggers, one cleaned, one blood-crusted. The Carrare syringe, the broken gramophone record, the wooden soldier with its missing arm, the 2 lockets, the forged will, the tin box, the child's pinafore, the white rose, now pressed between glass. Poirot arranged them in a perfect circle like the stations of a dark rosary. Then he spoke, not to the empty room, but to the house itself. "You have kept your secrets well, mon vieux manoir. But secrets are like snow. They melt in the light." Clara entered barefoot, a shawl over her nightgown. Behind her, the 12 children followed in a silent crocodile. Pajama-clad, eyes wide, clutching paper lanterns they had made the night before. The matron brought up the rear, finger to lips. Clara's voice was soft. "They wanted to see the sunrise with you, Monsieur Poirot. You are part of their story now." Poirot bowed. "Then let us finish the story together." He led them to the French windows. Outside, the rose garden lay silver with frost. The summer-house door stood open. Inside, a new plaque gleamed. "Listen well, mes petits. This house tried to keep a family whole by breaking it. But families are not built of blood or wills. They are built of choices." He lifted the wooden soldier. This belonged to Jamie Hargrove. His mother kept it alive for 16 years. When she could not save her son, she tried to save the idea of him by punishing the man who sent him away. Next, the locket with Clara's mother. Sir Reginald loved in secret. He hid a daughter, then a son, then a nephew, until the walls groaned with silence. Cedric played the same prelude every night, not to haunt but to remember the mother who sang it to him in the trenches. Planted by Clara, tended by Cedric, watered by tears. It blooms out of season because love refuses calendars. He placed his hand over the circle. Every crime began with love twisted. Every lie was a shield, but shields rust. Truth is the only weapon that never dulls. Inside, a final letter sealed with the Ashford crest addressed to the children of Holiday Manor, open on the first sunrise after the longest night. Clara's eyes shone. He wrote this the night he died, before the poison, before the cleaver. Poirot smiled. He knew the end was coming. He chose legacy over pride. The children, given leave, ran. Clara watched, tears frozen on her cheeks. Poirot gathered the dark artifacts into a silk handkerchief. He walked to the summer house alone. There he dug a small hole beneath the white rose. Into it he placed the kukri daggers, the syringe, the broken record, the forged will. He covered them with earth, then scattered the pressed rose petals. "Rest now," he murmured. "The children have no need of you." He returned to the terrace. The sun cleared the downs, a blade of gold. The children stood in a circle, paper lanterns raised. Clara struck a match. One by one, the lanterns caught tiny suns against the dawn. They released them. The lanterns rose, drifted over the rose garden, over the summer house, over the cliffs, and out to sea. Poirot's Daimler waited, engine purring. Clara embraced him. "You gave us truth," she said. "We give you peace." He kissed her forehead. "Keep the candle burning, mademoiselle, but let the children light it." As the car pulled away, he looked back. The children waved from the terrace, lanterns now specks against the sky. Clara stood in the doorway, the music box in her hands, the lullaby faint but clear. Poirot opened his window. The air smelled of frost and roses. He closed his eyes. The case was closed. The house was open. The circle was complete. The Hargrove Children's Home glowed with 100 candles. 20 children now, new arrivals, new laughter. The Cedric Ashford Memorial Wing had a library. The summer house a stage for puppet shows. The white rosebush bloomed year-round, tended by small hands. On the nursery wall, a new plaque. "You are seen, you are loved, you are home." And in London, Hercule Poirot received a parcel. Inside, a single white rose pressed between glass and a child's drawing. 12 stick figures holding hands beneath a Christmas tree. At the bottom, in wobbly crayon, Poirot pinned the drawing above his desk beside the postcard, the emerald studs, and the ivory letter opener. He allowed himself one small, satisfied smile.